The wind in this part of Wyoming territory did not just blow. It scoured. It was a living thing, a predator made of ice and speed. And it hunted the high plains of 1870s Wyoming with a vengeance. Silas Greeley felt it trying to peel the skin from his face. He kept his head down, the brim of his hat pulled low. His collar turned up so high the rough wool scratched his ears. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Gideon, hated this as much as he did. The animal's steps were short and angry, plumes of steam jetting from its nostrils only to be instantly torn away by the gale. Silas should have been in the cabin. He should have been by the stove, feeding wood into the fire, staring at the flames and letting the ghosts of his past sit with him. That was his ritual. But the fence line called. It had been 2 winters since the fire, 2 years since he had buried what was left of his wife, Sarah, and his 5-year-old son, Thomas. 2 years of the townsfolk in Laramie whispering. They whispered that he had been too slow. They whispered that he had been drunk. They whispered that maybe the fire wasn't an accident at all, that a man so cold and silent might be capable of anything. So he kept to his spread. He rode the lines. He fixed fences that no cattle were trying to cross. He did the work because the work was all that was left. The snow was coming down thick now, not in flakes, but in horizontal needles. He was riding the north line, the one that bordered the creek, though the creek was long since frozen solid. He squinted against the whiteout. That was when he saw it. At first, it was just a smudge of color against the gray bark of a cottonwood. Not the right color, not the dun of a dead deer or the gray of a wolf. It was a pale, unnatural shape, slumped at the base of the tree. His first instinct was to ride on. Trouble. Nothing good ever came from the world beyond his fences. It was a lesson he had learned in blood and ash. But Gideon stopped, his ears pricked forward, snorting at the thing. Silas grunted, swinging his leg over. His boots hit the packed snow with a dull thud. He pulled his rifle from the scabbard, holding it low. He walked slow. It might be a trap. Bushwhackers. Or maybe just a drunkard from town who had wandered off. He got closer. The shape resolved. It was a woman. She was half buried in a drift, wearing almost nothing, just a thin, torn petticoat, the white cotton soaked through and frozen stiff. Her hair was matted with snow and ice. Her skin was a terrifying, waxy blue. Her feet, shockingly, were bare. He could see the dark, frozen blood caked on her soles. Silas stopped, his rifle lowering. He stared. This was not a trap. This was a death. He knelt, his knee cracking the icy crust of the snow. He put his gloved fingers to her neck. He felt nothing. He leaned closer, pulling his scarf down, putting his ear near her blue lips. He waited. 1 second. 2. A puff of vapor, so small it was almost imaginary, clouded his ear. She was alive. He swore, low and viciously, at the sky, at the wind, at God. He was a man who wanted only to be left alone, and the world kept throwing its broken pieces at him. He looked at her face. It was young, but bruised. A dark purple blotch stained her cheekbone, and her lip was split. He could not leave her. The part of him that was Sarah's husband, that was Thomas's father, was dead. But the man who had once been a man, that part stirred, angry and reluctant. "Damn it," he muttered. He holstered his rifle. Lifting her was a misery. She was heavier than she looked, a dead weight, and her frozen clothes crackled like thin ice. He hauled her over his shoulder, a grunt escaping him as his boots slipped. He carried her to Gideon. The horse shied, smelling the strange, cold scent of her. "Easy," Silas growled, calming the horse with a hand on its neck before managing to heave the woman's limp body across the saddle. He mounted behind her, pulling her back against his chest. She was so cold he could feel it through his thick canvas coat. He wrapped one arm around her waist, holding her tight, and turned Gideon for home. The ride back was a fight. The wind tried to steal her from him, to rip her from his grasp. She was a frozen doll, her head lolling against his shoulder. He kept his head down, focusing only on the space between Gideon's ears, pushing through the white hell toward the thin gray line of smoke that marked his cabin. He kicked the door open and carried her inside. The cabin was one room, dark and smelling of pine, wood smoke, and old sorrow. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rope bed sat in the far corner. His bed, Sarah's bed. He would not put her there. He laid her on the thin cot near the hearth, the one he sometimes used when the nightmares got too bad and he couldn't stand the emptiness of the mattress. He piled 2 thick wool blankets on her. Then he stopped, staring. She was dying of cold. The frozen rags had to come off. He worked with a grim, impersonal efficiency. He took his knife and cut the frozen laces of the petticoat. The fabric was stuck to her skin. He had to fetch a bucket of lukewarm water from the stove's reservoir and sponge the cloth, wincing as it pulled away, taking thin layers of skin with it. He tried not to look. He was a rancher. He had gelded horses and birthed calves. This was just meat. But it was not. When he pulled the ruined garment away, he saw her back. His breath hissed between his teeth. It was a horror, from her shoulders to her waist. Her skin was a ruin of bruises and torn flesh, deep, weeping lashes, some fresh and bleeding sluggishly, others older, scabbed and purple. Someone had taken a whip, or a belt, and had tried to peel the skin from her bones. He stood up, his fists clenched. He felt a cold, familiar rage build in his chest, the rage he had felt standing over the ashes of his home. He turned away, forcing himself to breathe. He was not that man anymore. He would not be. He found the jar of salve he used for rope burns and livestock. He found clean rags. He boiled water. He went back to her. She was still unconscious, her breathing shallow. He turned her onto her side. He cleaned the wounds. He was not gentle, but he was thorough. He spread the salve over the raw flesh. She moaned, a low, animal sound, but did not wake. When he was done, he covered her with the blankets, pulling them up to her chin. He added more wood to the fire until it roared, throwing shadows that danced like devils on the log walls. He sat in his chair, the one opposite the cot, picked up his rifle, and laid it across his lap. He did not know if he was protecting her or protecting himself from her. He just waited. She woke hours later. The storm was at its peak, screaming like a banshee at the chimney. It started with a gasp. Silas watched, his face impassive. Her eyes flew open. They were wide, frantic, and saw nothing. Not the cabin, not the fire. She scrambled backward, hitting her head on the log wall with a dull crack. "No," she whimpered. Her voice was a dry rasp. "No, please, don't, I won't, please, no more." She saw him. The terror in her eyes doubled. She tried to push herself further into the wall, as if she could melt through the wood. "Them," she whispered, shaking. "They're coming back. You brought them." Silas did not move. He held up one hand, palm out. "You're safe." She just shook her head, her eyes darting from him to the door, to the windows, looking for the trap. "There's a storm," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "You were freezing on my fence line. No one is coming." He stood up, and she flinched so violently she almost fell off the cot. He stopped. "I'm getting you broth." He kept his movements slow. He went to the stove, ladled some of the thin rabbit stew he had made yesterday into a tin cup. He walked over, not too close, and set it on the floor, halfway between them. "Drink it," he said, "or don't." He went back to his chair. She stared at the cup. Her eyes were hollowed out by fear. He could see the war inside her, the need versus the terror. He turned his back deliberately, poking at the fire. He gave her the courtesy of not watching. He heard the scrape of the tin cup on the floorboards. He heard her sip, a painful, desperate sound, followed by a cough. When he turned back, the cup was empty. and she was huddled under the blankets again, watching him. The storm lasted for 4 days. The world shrank to the 4 walls of the cabin. The snow piled up past the windowsills, sealing them in. The light inside was gray and dim. The only sounds were the constant howl of the wind and the crackle of the fire. And the silence. It was a thick, heavy thing, full of unspoken questions and buried pain. Silas sat in his chair, oiling his tack, cleaning his rifle, his movements methodical. The woman, Marla, he had heard her mutter the name in her sleep, stayed on the cot. He tended her wounds every 12 hours. The first time, she had flinched and cried out when he touched her. The second time, she just trembled, her eyes squeezed shut, her teeth biting her lower lip until it bled. He was clinical. He cleaned. He applied salve. He covered her back. He did not speak. He offered food. She ate biscuits, jerky, more broth. She ate like a starving animal, fast, without looking, as if afraid he would take it away. He had to know. On the 3rd day, as he packed fresh snow into the water barrel to melt, he asked, "Who did this to you?" She was sitting up, the blanket clutched to her chest. She looked at the floor. "I ran." "From Laramie?" She nodded. "Why?" A long, long pause. The wind died for a moment, and the silence in the cabin became absolute. "I didn't do it," she whispered. Her voice was stronger, but brittle. "I didn't do what they said I did. I didn't." "What did they say?" She shook her head, a violent, sharp motion. "I ran." That was all he got. It was enough. He knew the kind of justice that came from Laramie, the kind that whispered behind backs and protected its own. They were trapped. The snow was too deep to even open the door more than a crack. He used the privy in the attached lean-to, and when she had to, he stood by the cabin door, his back turned, while she went. It was a humiliating animal existence. The cabin grew cold at night, especially in the hours before dawn when the fire burned low. He slept in his chair, wrapped in his coat. He watched her shiver on the cot. She was curled into a tight ball, her teeth chattering. He cursed. He got up, took the thickest quilt, Sarah's quilt, the one with the stitched bluebirds, from his bed and threw it on top of her. She looked at him, confused. "It's cold," he grunted, and went back to his chair. The cold still found her. He could see it. He remembered huddling with Sarah and Thomas for warmth, the 3 of them a single unit against the cold. The memory was a knife twisting in his gut. He would not. He could not. But she was trembling so hard the cot squeaked. He dragged his chair from the shadows and placed it on the hearth, his back to the wall, just a few feet from her cot. "We share the heat this way," he said, his voice flat. They were in the same small circle of firelight, but they were miles apart. 2 wounded animals in a den, waiting for the world to end. The nightmare came on the 4th night. Silas was dozing, his head slumped on his chest, rifle across his lap. A sound jerked him awake, a choked, terrified gasp. He was on his feet, rifle raised, before his eyes were fully open. It was her. She was thrashing, tangled in the blankets, her eyes squeezed shut. She was fighting someone. "Get off!" she screamed. A sound ripped from her throat. "Get off me! Don't! Don't!" "Woman," Silas said, his voice sharp. "Wake up!" She didn't hear him. She was lost in the terror. He stepped forward, hesitated. He did not touch people. Not anymore. "Wake up," he said, louder. He reached out and grabbed her shoulder, shaking her. Her eyes snapped open. She did not see Silas. She saw the man from her dream. She recoiled with a sound he would never forget. It was a half-scream, half-sob, a sound of pure, animal terror. She scrambled away from his hand as if it were a hot coal, hitting the wall again. "It's me," he said, pulling his hand back as if he'd been burned. "Silas, you're in the cabin. You're safe. You were dreaming." The reality broke through the fog. Her wild eyes focused on him. She saw the fire. She saw the cabin walls. The terror did not fade. It just transferred. The nightmare was gone, but the man was still there. He was real. He was the only solid thing in the room. Before he could move, she lunged. She didn't attack him. She grabbed the front of his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists. She buried her face in his chest, clinging to him with a desperate, crushing strength. Silas froze. He stood stiff, his arms at his sides, his rifle still dangling from one hand. He could feel her shaking. He could feel her breath, hot and ragged, through his shirt. He hadn't been touched like this in 2 years. She wasn't weeping. It was a dry, racking sob that shook her entire body, the sound of something broken beyond repair. He stood there for a long time. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he let the rifle rest against the wall. He raised his hand. He hesitated. He put it on her back, flat and heavy, over the wounds. He didn't pat. He didn't stroke. He just held her. He let her shake. He let her grieve. And he stared over her head at the empty chair where his wife used to sit. The next morning, the storm had broken. The world outside was silent, buried under 4 feet of snow, and blindingly bright. The air in the cabin was different, brittle. Marla was up. She was weak, her movement slow, but she was moving. She folded the blankets on her cot with precise, jerky motions. She used the privy, came back, and washed her face in the basin. Silas watched her over the rim of his coffee cup. She was still cautious, but the terror had receded, replaced by a quiet, stubborn energy. She was a survivor. He started slicing bacon into the skillet. "I can," she said. Her voice was hoarse. Silas looked at her. "I've got it." "Please." Her eyes met his for a second. "Let me, I need to." He didn't understand, but he didn't argue. He wiped his hands on his trousers and handed her the heavy cast-iron skillet. Her hands were still raw, maybe frostbitten. She was weaker than she thought. The handle was heavy. It slipped. The skillet hit the floorboards with a deafening, metallic clang. Silas didn't move. Marla froze. She didn't bend to pick it up. She didn't speak. Her hands flew up, covering her head, her shoulders hunched, her spine curved, her entire body curling in on itself. She was waiting for the blow. Silas stood perfectly still. He saw her posture. He had seen whipped dogs behave the same way. He understood, in that moment, that the men who had lashed her back had also used their fists. They had hit her for dropping things. They had hit her for speaking. They had hit her for being alive. He waited. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of the fire. After a full minute, he said, his voice very quiet, "It's just a pan." She didn't move. Marla. She lowered her hands. Slowly. She was trembling from head to foot. She looked at him, then at the pan, then back at him. Her face was a mask of confusion and lingering fear. He bent down, his knees cracking. He picked up the heavy skillet. He held it out to her, handle first. "Try again," he said. She stared at the skillet, then at his hand, hesitantly. She reached out and took it. Her grip was tight this time. She did not drop it. The silence returned, but it was different. That night, the 6th night, the tension was back. It was not the tension of fear, or of the storm. It was the tension of 2 people in a small room who had seen too much of each other. Silas was banking the fire, getting ready to settle into his chair. He had not returned to his bed. "Mr. Greeley?" she whispered from the cot. "Silas," he said, not turning. "Silas." A pause. He could hear her swallow. I can pay my way for the food, for the medicine." He stopped, his back to her. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," she said. Her voice was suddenly stronger, but brittle, dead. I know how it is. Nothing is free. He heard her move. He turned around, slowly. She was sitting up on the cot. She was watching him with those wide, haunted eyes. If you want to, she whispered, and her hand went to the top of the blanket. I won't stop you. Silas stared. He did not understand. I know what men want, she said, her voice flat, as if reciting something. I won't fight. I won't scream. I'll just get it done. You saved me. I owe you. She pulled the blanket down slightly, exposing the pale, bruised skin of her shoulder. She was offering him the only thing she thought she had left to trade. Silas's stomach turned. He looked at her, at this broken, terrified woman offering her body as payment for broth and a warm fire. He saw the bruises on her neck. He saw the deadness in her eyes. He saw every man who had ever hurt her, standing right behind her. And he felt the cold rage again. He walked over to the cot. She flinched, but held her ground. She thought he was coming to accept. He stopped, standing over her. He looked down at her for a long time. The firelight flickered, catching the lines of grief etched around his mouth. Get under the blanket, he said, his voice a low gravel. You'll catch your death. She blinked, confused. But I'm not that kind of man, he said. She stared at him. She searched his face, looking for the trick, the lie, the prelude to violence. She found nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. I'm not one of them, he said. Her face began to crumple. This kindness, this refusal, was something her world had not prepared her for. It was a language she didn't speak. This act of not touching her, this simple decency, was more than she could bear. The tears came. They were not the racking sobs of her nightmare. They were silent, hot tears that overflowed and ran down her bruised cheeks. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, hiding her face, her shoulders shaking. It was the sound of a lock rusting open, the sound of disbelief. Silas watched her for a moment. He wanted to leave, to give her the privacy to break, but there was nowhere to go. He turned away. He picked up his own quilt, went to his chair, and sat down. He did not sleep. He sat in the dark, listening to the sound of her quiet weeping and the dying hiss of the fire. The morning after the storm broke was a violence of light. The sun struck the endless white, and the world became a mirror that tried to blind you. Silas rose before dawn, his bones aching from the chair. Marla was still asleep on the cot, her face turned toward the wall, her breathing deep and even. He moved with practiced silence, pulling on his boots, shrugging into his coat. He needed to dig out the barn, check on Gideon and the 2 milk cows. He expected them to be half frozen and angry. He had the door cracked open, the icy air stinging his face, when her voice came from behind him. I'm coming. He turned. She was sitting up. The blankets pooled around her waist. Her hair was a wild, tangled mess. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but the deadness was gone. In its place was a flat, stubborn resolve. Stay by the fire, he said. The snow is higher than your waist. There's nothing for you to do. I will not be dead weight, she said. Her voice was hoarse, but it was not a request. I will not be a burden. Silas looked at her for a long second. He saw the pride, fragile as it was, and knew that arguing would be a kind of cruelty. It would make her a patient, an invalid. She was done being a victim. He grunted. There's a pair of my old boots by the stove. Worn out, stuff them with rags, or your feet will freeze solid. He went out, taking the shovel. The world was remade. The snow was a pristine, rolling ocean of white, drifted up against the cabin, burying the fences. The air was so cold it felt like breathing powdered glass. He began to dig a trench toward the barn. He was halfway there when the cabin door opened again. Marla emerged, squinting against the glare. She was drowning in his old clothes, a pair of his canvas trousers, belted tight with a bit of rope, one of his flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up a half-dozen times. The worn-out boots were comical on her, but she moved with purpose. She had wrapped her head in a spare rag, and she carried the barn's empty water bucket. She didn't wait for instructions. She saw the path he was digging and fell in behind him, taking the smaller shovel. "I said stay," he grumbled, not stopping his work. "I didn't listen," she replied, her voice tight. The work was brutal. The snow was heavy, packed by the wind. Silas worked with a relentless, mechanical rhythm. Shovel, lift, twist, throw. He was a machine built for this. Marla was not. Within 10 minutes, she was breathing hard, her face pale. The movement pulled at the healing wounds on her back. Silas could see her wince every time she lifted a shovelful. But she did not stop. She did not slow down. She just set her jaw, her eyes fixed on the patch of snow in front of her, and dug. He stopped, leaning on his shovel. "You'll tear your back open." "Then it will tear," she said, not looking at him. She plunged the shovel back into the drift. He saw her stubbornness. It was the same thing that had kept her alive, barefoot in the snow. It was a cold, hard thing, and he respected it. "Fine," he said. "You're a fool." "I've been called worse," she muttered. They reached the barn. Gideon whinnied. A sound of profound relief and complaint. The cows mooed, low and miserable. The inside of the barn was dark and surprisingly warm, thick with the animal smell of hay and manure. "Get them water," Silas ordered, throwing the door open. "I'll clear the stalls." He forked hay into the mangers, his movements quick. He glanced over. Marla was at the pump, her whole body straining to break the ice and get the handle moving. She got it, the pump groaning in protest. She filled the bucket and hauled it, half stumbling, to the horse's stall. Gideon, grateful, dipped his head. When Silas turned back, she was not getting more water. She had picked up the spare pitchfork and was walking toward the cow stalls. "What are you doing?" "Mucking," she said, as if it were obvious. "That's my job." "Not today." She jammed the fork into the soiled hay. She was not strong. The load was too heavy. She struggled, her arms shaking, but she got it into the wheelbarrow. Silas watched her for a moment. He saw her bite her lip, a bead of sweat freezing on her temple despite the cold. She was in pain. He said nothing. He turned and started mucking the other stall. They worked in silence, the only sounds the scrape of the forks and the contented chewing of the animals. They worked like that for days. The thaw came slow, a false spring that melted the top layer of snow during the day and froze it into a treacherous crust at night. But the seal was broken. The world was accessible. Marla worked from the moment she woke until she collapsed on the cot. She chopped kindling, her motions jerky and inefficient, but she filled the wood box. She learned to milk the cows, her cold hands clumsy on their udders. But she filled the pail. She cooked. She took the salt pork and beans, the flour and lard, and made meals that were simple, but hot. She scrubbed the floorboards until her knuckles were raw. She was trying to scrub away her own shame, trying to pay a debt she didn't owe with the currency of her own labor. Silas let her. He understood that this work was a kind of medicine. It was a way for her to prove to herself that she was not just a body, not just a victim, but a pair of hands, a person. He found himself talking. It wasn't intentional. The silence in the cabin had changed. It was no longer the heavy, grief-filled silence of his solitude. It was an occupied silence, a shared one, and it started to feel louder than words. He was in the barn, grooming Gideon. The horse's winter coat was thick, and Silas worked the curry comb in long, steady strokes. Marla was on a stool, mending a leather harness, her stitches small and neat. "My boy, Thomas," Silas said, his voice startling in the quiet. He hadn't said the name aloud in he didn't know how long. Marla's hands stilled on the leather. She did not look up, but he knew she was listening. "He loved this horse," Silas said, slapping Gideon's flank. "Used to beg me to let him ride. I'd sit him up here, right on the saddle, and walk him around the yard, he'd laugh, a high, thin laugh, like a bird. He paused, his hand resting on the horse's back. He wanted a colt, all his own. He asked me the day before. He asked if Gideon would have a colt. I told him maybe in the spring. He stared at the barn wall, but he was seeing the fire, the orange light against the black sky, the roar of it. Sarah, my wife, she planted sunflowers all along the south wall of the cabin, said a man needed something bright to look at. He scraped the comb against the wall, pulling out a clump of hair. They were burning, I remember that. The flowers were all on fire, like torches, lighting the way. He stopped. He had said too much. The grief was rising in his throat, a taste like ash and bile. He felt exposed, weak. Marla still did not look up. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't offer the empty, useless words of comfort that people used. She just sat there, her hands quiet in her lap. She let his words hang in the air. She let his grief exist. She did not try to fix it or lessen it. She simply heard it. After a long minute, she picked up the needle and thread. She pushed it through the thick leather. "I imagine they were beautiful," she said, her voice very soft. Silas closed his eyes. He leaned his forehead against Gideon's warm side. "Yeah," he breathed. "They were." That night, the dam of silence, once broken, gave way entirely. They sat by the fire. The stew she had made was thick, and he had eaten 2 bowls. He was cleaning his rifle. She was darning one of his socks. "Laramie," she said. His hand stopped. "It was a preacher's son, Josiah Wicks." She spoke to the sock, her fingers turning it over and over. "His father? He speaks of fire and brimstone like he owns them both. Josiah. He has his father's eyes, but his smile is different. It's soft and mean." She pulled the thread tight. "I worked at the laundry. He came by. He brought his father's shirts. He'd talk to me. At first, I thought he was just lonely. Then I saw how he looked at me, like I was something on his plate. He cornered me behind the general store. I was buying flour. He put his hands on me. He said he knew what I was. Said all women like me just wanted to be tamed. I slapped him," she said, her voice flat, without pride. "I slapped him hard. His face went white, then red. He laughed. He told me I would be sorry." That night, the town turned. It was like he had poisoned the well. Women who had spoken to me friendly the day before crossed the street to avoid me. The preacher gave a sermon about the harlot of Babylon walking among them. "His friends came," she whispered. She stopped darning. Her hands were shaking. "3 of them. They came to my room. They said Josiah had sent them to teach me my place, to finish what he started." Silas put the rifle down. The metallic click was loud in the cabin. "They dragged me out. They did what they did. The things you fixed. They used a mule strap." She was breathing fast, her eyes squeezed shut. No one opened a door. I screamed. I know I did. I screamed, and the whole town just listened." She opened her eyes. They were dry. All the tears had been burned out of her. "The sheriff came after. When they were done, he looked at me, lying there in the dirt. He didn't offer me a hand. He just looked disgusted." Her voice became a perfect, cold imitation of a man's gruff tone. "This town don't want your kind, girl. You got a choice. You can be on the trail by dawn, or you'll hang by noon. We don't abide in decency here." She looked at Silas. "He called me indecent." She folded the sock. She set it on the pile, perfectly neat. "I ran. I didn't have a coat. I grabbed my shawl. They had torn my dress. I ran until my feet were bleeding. I ran until the snow started. And I looked for a place to die. And I found your tree." Silas said nothing. He stared into the fire, the cold, quiet rage he had felt when he first saw her back. It was nothing compared to this. This was a white-hot, killing rage. He wanted to ride into Laramie. He wanted to find Josiah Wicks and the sheriff. He wanted to burn their whole righteous town to the ground. But he didn't move. He just sat there, his hands clenched on his knees, and let the murder in his heart burn itself out. He finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. "They're animals." "No," Marla said, her voice tired. "Animals just kill you. They don't ruin you first." The next week, the creek thawed enough to flow. The ground was still hard, but the south-facing slopes were clear of snow. "The north fence is down," Silas announced one morning. "Storm took out 3 posts." He expected her to stay. He was saddling Gideon when he heard the barn door creak. She was there, wearing his old coat. "I can't ride," she said. "I know." He finished with a cinch. "I'll be back by dark." "I can sit a horse," she said, her jaw set. "I just don't know how to make it go." He looked at her. "You'll fall." "Then I'll get back on." He sighed. It was a sound of pure exasperation. He went and saddled one of the cows, a gentle old girl named Bess. Marla's face flushed. "I am not riding a cow." A ghost of a smile touched Silas's mouth. It was a strange, rusty expression. "Then you'll ride Gideon. I'll walk." "No, we'll both ride." He looked at Gideon, then at her. He untied the horse. He let him out. He cupped his hands. "Put your foot here." She did. He lifted her, and she scrambled onto the saddle. She was small and looked terrified. He swung up behind her, his arms enclosing her. "Hold the horn," he said, his voice close to her ear. She flinched, then gripped the saddle horn. He took the reins. Don't talk." He kicked Gideon into a walk. He could feel her. Her body was stiff, her back rigid. He could feel her trying not to lean against him. But as the horse moved, she was forced to. Her back, the back he had healed, was pressed against his chest. He could smell her hair. It smelled of wood smoke and lye soap. They rode. The landscape was vast, a patchwork of white snow and brown. Dead grass. The mountains were sharp and blue in the distance. They were 2 small specks in a vast, empty, beautiful wilderness. He did not speak. He just rode. He felt her relax, just a little. Her shoulders, which had been up by her ears, lowered. She let the horse's rhythm move her. They reached the fence line. He dismounted, then helped her down. His hands on her waist were impersonal, firm. They worked. It was hard, cold work. The ground was half frozen. Silas had to use the heavy iron bar to break the earth before he could even start digging the post holes. He worked without his coat, his shirt sleeves rolled up, the muscles in his back and shoulders cording with the strain. Marla was his assistant. She held the new posts steady while he tamped the dirt around them. She fetched the hammer, the staples. She pulled the wire taut while he fixed it. They did not speak. They didn't need to. He would nod at a tool. She would hand it to him. She would point to a loose wire. He would fix it. Their movements, clumsy at first, found a rhythm. They became a unit. 2 people, 1 job. At midday, they stopped. He pulled a canteen from the saddlebag, along with a cloth bundle, jerky and cold biscuits. He handed her a piece. She took it. They sat on a fallen log, their shoulders a few inches apart. They ate, staring out at the valley. "It's quiet," she said. "It's always quiet," he said. "No," she said. "In town. There's always noise, wagons, people yelling, pianos from the saloons, dogs, even at night." She looked out at the empty land. This quiet is bigger. It feels clean." He grunted. chewing on the jerky. He understood. It was the clean quiet that had kept him sane. When they finished, she stood up and began gathering the tools. He watched her. She was still thin, still pale, but she was not the blue creature he had pulled from the snow. Her movements had purpose. Back at the cabin, the sun was low. The day's work had warmed them, but the evening chill was setting in. "Need to wash," Silas said. He was grimed with sweat and dirt. He hauled the big copper tub into the middle of the room and filled it with buckets of water, some cold from the barrel, too hot from the stove. He turned to her. "You first." Her eyes widened. "No, I can wait. It'll be cold by the time I'm done. Get in." She looked at the tub, then at him, her face full of an old fear. He sighed. He understood. He turned his back to her, deliberately, and walked to the far wall, where he kept his harnesses. "I'll be in the barn. Holler when you're decent." He left. Marla stared at the tub. Steam rose from the water. She locked the door. She looked at the windows. She looked at the door. Trembling, she undressed. She saw her own body. The bruises had faded to yellow and pale green. The cuts on her back were puckered, pink scars. She sank into the hot water. It was a miracle. It was the first real bath, the first moment of true, safe warmth she had known. She wept, but this time, the tears were quiet, and for herself. When Silas returned, the cabin smelled of soap. The tub was empty. Marla was by the fire, dressed in his old shirt, her damp hair hanging down her back. He said nothing. He locked the door. He hauled the water back outside. He brought the tub in. He refilled it. He did not go to the barn. He went to his corner, by his bed, and turned his back. "My turn," he said. Marla sat on the cot, her back to him. She heard the splash of water. She heard him sigh as he sank into the tub. It was the most profound intimacy she had ever known, to be in a room with a man who was unarmed, unclothed, and to feel safe. She stared at the fire, listening to the quiet sounds of him washing. He was quick. He stood, the sound of dripping water. He dressed. "Done," he said. She turned. He was standing by the stove, bare-chested, his trousers on. He was drying his hair with a rough towel. His back was to her. She saw it. It was not like her scars, the messy, chaotic pattern of a beating. This was a single, terrible mark, a pale, thick ridge of scar tissue that ran from his left shoulder down to his right hip. It was an old wound, healed over, but it was horrifying. It was the clear, undeniable mark of a bullwhip. She stood up. He heard her move and turned, the towel in his hand. He saw her staring. He didn't cover himself. He just waited. She walked toward him, slowly. She stopped just out of his reach. What happened?" she whispered. His face was hard. "Railroad men, 4, maybe 5 years back, up near Cheyenne." "Why?" "They were beating a worker, a Chinaman. Didn't like the way he looked at them. They were going to kill him. I stepped in." "You fought them?" "There were 6 of them," he said, his voice flat. "I didn't fight long. They tied me to a wagon wheel, took turns, taught me a lesson about minding my own business." Marla's hand came up. Her fingers trembled. She wanted to trace the scar, to understand the pain. She reached out, her hand hovering in the air between them, afraid to touch. "Did it hurt?" she asked. Her voice choked. Silas looked at her hand, then at her face. He saw the pity, the horror. He didn't want it. He turned away from her, pulling his shirt on. He spoke, his voice muffled by the fabric. "Not as much as losing them." That night, the cabin was suffocating. The shared work, the shared stories, the scars. It had all built a new kind of tension. It was not fear, it was something else. Something that hummed in the air between them. Silas was sharpening his knife. The shing, shing, shing of the steel on the stone was the only sound. Marla sat on the cot. She had been mending his shirt. She had seen his scar. He had seen hers. They were the same, broken in the same places. He had been kind. He had fed her. He had protected her. He had not asked for anything. Maybe he was just waiting. Maybe he was too proud to ask. Maybe he was waiting for her to offer. She still owed him. She owed him her life. She put the mended shirt down on her lap. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She was terrified, but she had to. Silas? The shing stopped. She stood up. Her legs felt weak. He looked up, his eyes dark in the firelight, reflecting the small flames. I can take it off, she whispered. Her voice was shaking so badly she could barely speak. If you want to. His face did not change. He just watched her. Just do it, she begged, a tear spilling over. Please, get it over with. Silas froze. His knuckles on the knife handle went white. He had been so sure she understood. After he had refused her, after she had cried, after the work, the talk, he thought she knew. He looked at her. She was standing there, trembling, offering herself like a sacrifice. She was bracing for a violation, her eyes squeezed shut, her hands fisted at her sides. She still thought this was the only way, that his kindness was just a long prelude to the same inevitable act. The rage he had felt for the men in Laramie was nothing. This broke his heart. He stood up, slowly. He did not want to startle her. He placed the knife and the stone carefully on the floor. He walked toward her. She flinched. She braced herself, her shoulders hunching. He stopped, right in front of her. She was so small. He did not reach for her shirt. He did not reach for her body. He reached for her hand. Her hand was fisted, her knuckles white. He gently, patiently, uncurled her fingers with his own. Her hand was ice-cold and trembling. He held it. He held it in his own warm, calloused grasp. He held it gently, but with a strength that was absolute. She opened her eyes. They were swimming with terror and confusion. He looked straight into them. Marla, he said. His voice was a low, rough vow. It was the truest thing he had said in 2 years. No one, he said, will ever take anything from you again. She stared at him. She heard the words. She tried to understand them. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rejecting her. He was protecting her. He was protecting her from himself, from the very idea. It was too much. The kindness was a physical blow. It was a contradiction to every cruel law of survival she had learned. The dam broke. It was not the silent weeping. It was not the nightmare sob. A sound was ripped from her throat, a raw, guttural wail of a pain so deep it had no words. Her legs gave out. She didn't faint. She simply collapsed. He was ready. He caught her. He didn't let her fall. He pulled her against his chest, his arms locking around her, holding her up as her body was racked with sobs. She cried. She wept against his shirt, her fists grabbing his arms, her entire body shaking with a violence that terrified him. She cried for her lost innocence, for the men who had hurt her, for the town that had betrayed her, and for the unbelievable, painful relief of this one. Good man. Silas just held her. He stood like an oak tree in a windstorm. His feet planted. He absorbed her grief. He let her break. He let her shatter. And he held the pieces. He did not say, "It's all right." It was not all right. He just held her. He held her until the terrible, tearing sobs quieted into hitched breaths, until she was limp with exhaustion, a dead weight in his arms. He did not let go. He walked her to the cot. He did not lay her down. He sat on the edge, pulling her down with him, still holding her tight. He leaned his broad back against the cold log wall, her body pressed against his side. She was spent. Her head rested on his shoulder. He pulled the thick wool blankets over both of them, tucking them in around her. He did not move. He just sat there, a sentinel in the dark, the rifle on the floor by his feet. Marla, for the first time since she had slapped Josiah Wicks, felt the anchor of another human soul. She was not alone. The darkness was outside, but it was not in here. She fell asleep, her breath warming his neck. Silas stayed awake for a long time, staring at the dying, red embers of the fire. He felt the light weight of her head on his shoulder, the warmth of her body through his clothes. He was holding another person. It was a terrifying, fragile, and almost forgotten feeling. Hours later, his own chin sank to his chest, and he fell into a shallow, fitful sleep, his arms still locked around her. Two wrecks lashed together in a storm, finding, for one night, a quiet harbor. Spring did not arrive in Wyoming. It had to fight for every inch of ground. It came in brief, muddy thaws, followed by sudden, spiteful snows, but it came. The creek, which had been a frozen scar, began to roar. The sound of running water was a constant, restless noise. Patches of brown grass appeared on the slopes, then pale green shoots. The air, which had smelled of nothing but ice, now carried the rich, dark scent of mud and damp pine. With the thaw, the mood in the cabin lifted. It was as if the sun, melting the snow, was also melting the frost that had encased them. Silas took Marla out of the barn and into the wide, muddy yard. "You're not riding that cow," he stated. It was not a question. "And you're not riding behind me. You'll learn on Gideon." "He is too tall," Marla said, eyeing the buckskin. Gideon was a big horse, built for a big man in a hard country. "He's gentle," Silas said, "gentler than I am." He spent an afternoon teaching her. He was a patient teacher, his voice low and steady. He showed her how to mount, how to hold the reins, how to shift her weight. She was terrified. Every time Gideon took a step, she tensed, her hands gripping the saddle horn so tightly her knuckles were white. "You're strangling it," Silas told her, tapping the horn. "Let him move. Feel him under you. He knows what he's doing." "I'll fall." "You probably will," he agreed. "Then you'll get back on, same as mucking a stall. Just dirt." She did fall. The third day, Gideon shied at a rabbit, and Marla, stiff with fear, went right off his side into a patch of soft mud. She lay there for a second, stunned. The wind knocked out of her. She was covered, head to foot, in brown slime. Silas walked over. Standing above her, he looked down, his face impassive. She looked up at him, at the sky, at the horse who was now grazing peacefully a few feet away. A small, strange sound bubbled in her throat. It was a giggle. It surprised her as much as it did him. It was a rusty, unused sound. Then it became a laugh. She laughed, sitting in the mud, her hair matted. Silas stared. He had never heard her laugh. He had never heard her make a sound of joy. A slow warmth spread through his chest. The corner of his mouth, the one that had been pulled down by grief for 2 years, hitched. He let out a short, rough bark. It was not a giggle. It was a laugh, pulled up from a deep, dusty place. It was the first time he had laughed since Thomas had been alive. The sound startled them both into silence. They looked at each other. Marla's laughter faded into a wide, genuine smile. His faded back into his usual grim line, but his eyes were different. They were lighter. "Well," he said, clearing his throat. He offered her a hand. "You're dirty." "So are you," she said, taking his hand. He pulled her up. He did not let go right away. His hand was warm and calloused around hers. The mud was between them, but so was the shared sound. "Get back on the horse, Marla," he said, his voice quiet. She did, And she didn't fall again that day. The warmer weather meant harder work. The fences needed mending all the way to the south ridge. The ground for a garden had to be broken. The cabin needed airing, the winter's grime scrubbed out. One afternoon, Silas came in from a long ride checking for strayed cattle. He was caked in sweat, dust, and the mud of the low creeks. He smelled like a horse. "I'm hauling the tub out," he said. "The sun's high. It's warm enough." He dragged the copper tub into the yard. On the south side of the cabin, where the sun was hottest and the wind was blocked, he and Marla hauled buckets of water, cold from the creek, hot from the stove, until it was full. He turned to her, stripping his gloves off. "Go on inside. I'll call when I'm decent." Marla looked at the tub. She looked at him. He was filthy. His shirt was plastered to his back. She remembered her own bath, the fear and the relief. She remembered the safety he had given her by turning his back. "No," she said. He stopped, his hand on his shirt buttons. "What?" "You need your back scrubbed," she said. Her face was hot. "Those men, you probably can't reach." She was talking about the railroad men, about his scar. Silas's face hardened. "I manage." "Let me," she said. It was not a plea. It was an offer, an equal exchange. "I'm not afraid. You washed my back when I was broken. Let me wash yours." He looked at her for a long, long time. He saw no fear in her eyes. He saw no pity. He saw strength. He saw a woman, not a victim. He gave a single curt nod. He unbuttoned his shirt, pulled it off, and threw it on the ground. He turned his back to her, a silent invitation. She saw his scar in the bright sunlight. It was pale and stark against the tanned skin of his back. She took the bar of lye soap, the rough cloth. She dipped it in the water. She touched him. Her hand was trembling, just slightly. She placed the cloth on his shoulder, above the scar. He was warm. His muscles were hard as rock under her hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. He just stood there, his back to her, giving her his trust. She began to wash him. She scrubbed the dirt from his shoulders, his arms, and then, her touch becoming gentle, she traced the scar with the cloth, from his shoulder down to his hip. She washed it, as if she could wash away the memory, the pain. He let out a breath, a low, quiet sound. She moved around him, washing his chest, his stomach. He was hard from work. She had only ever been touched by men in anger or in the cold. Clinical healing. This was different. This was care. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low rasp. "It's just water," she whispered. She stepped back. "I will let you finish." She turned to go inside. "Marla." She stopped. "Wait." She turned back. He was still standing by the tub. He was watching her. The look in his eyes was not the flat, dead look of the man who had found her. It was not the cold anger. It was something new, a deep, aching reverence. "You never," he said, his voice rough. "You never got to choose. You never got to just be—" She didn't know what he meant. He gestured to the tub. "The water is still hot. We waste nothing, not heat, not time." It was an invitation. She looked at the tub, then at him. He was bare-chested, vulnerable, his scar visible to the world. He was not hiding. She made a decision. She, too, would stop hiding. Her hands went to the buttons of his flannel shirt. She unfastened the first one, then the second. Her fingers were clumsy. Silas watched. He did not move. He did not breathe. She slipped the shirt off her shoulders, letting it fall to the dirt. She stood before him in her thin chemise. She saw his eyes trace the healed, puckered scars on her own shoulders, the ones that peeked above the thin cotton. He stepped toward her. He did not reach for her. He did not try to touch her. He reached for the soap. He held it out to her. She took it. She unlaced her chemise. She let it fall. She stepped out of her trousers. She stood naked in the Wyoming sunlight. She was thin, her ribs visible, her body a map of past cruelties. But she was not ashamed, not in front of him. She stepped into the tub, sinking into the hot water with a sigh. He knelt beside the tub. He did not get in. He just knelt. He took the cloth from her hand. He dipped it in the water, and, with a reverence that felt like a prayer, he began to wash her back. He touched her scars. His large, calloused thumb traced the lines where the whip had cut her. He was not hungry. He was grieving. He was mourning what had been done to her. "No one," he whispered, his voice thick, "should have ever touched you like that." She leaned her head back, closing her eyes. "They didn't," she said. "They didn't touch me. They just touched my skin." He stopped. He looked at her face, the way the sun caught the dampness on her eyelashes. He put the cloth down. He cupped her face in his hands. His palms were rough, but his touch was so gentle it made her want to weep. He leaned in. She knew what was happening. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Their first kiss was a disaster. It was awkward and clumsy. His lips were chapped, and he didn't know how to be gentle. Her lips were trembling, and she didn't know how to receive. Their teeth clicked. She flinched. A small, involuntary movement, remembering Josiah's wet, demanding mouth. Silas froze instantly. He pulled back, his face clouding over with shame. "I am sorry, "No," she said. She grabbed the front of his trousers, her hands wet. "No, do not be sorry. Just try again." He looked at her. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time, they were not full of fear. They were full of want. He leaned in again. This time, there was no fumbling. It was just a press of mouths. It was not hungry. It was not passionate. It was a question. "Are you there?" And she answered. She kissed him back. A simple, trembling pressure. "I am here." It was overwhelming. It was the first kiss of her life. The first one that was given, not taken. The first one that was about her. He pulled away, his breathing ragged. He rested his forehead against hers. "Marla," he breathed. "Silas," she whispered. That night, the cabin was charged with a new, terrifying energy. They ate dinner in near total silence. Every accidental brush of hands, every shared glance, was electric. He did not go to his chair. She did not lie on her cot. They stood by the dying fire, the shadows dancing around them. "Marla," he said, and his voice was raw. "I know," she said. He reached for her, his hand trembling. He did not grab her. He laid his hand on her shoulder, flat and heavy. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I am more scared of not than of this." He led her to his bed. The rope bed. Sarah's bed. The bed he had not slept in for 2 years. He had changed the linens that morning, after the bath. He did not undress her. He waited. She undressed herself, her movements slow, deliberate. She was claiming this. He undressed, his back to her, and slid under the quilt. He left space for her. She got in. The bed was cold. He was warm. She lay on her back, stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling. He turned on his side, propping himself up on an elbow. He looked down at her. "This is not," he stammered. "I do not know how to be gentle." "I do not know how to be anything else," she whispered. He touched her face. He traced the old bruise on her cheek. Now just a pale yellow shadow. He touched her lips. He kissed her. This time, it was slow. It was exploring. It was tender. He moved his hand from her face to her shoulder, to the scars. He kissed her shoulder. He kissed the healed, puckered flesh. She began to tremble. He moved on top of her. He was heavy, but he held his weight on his elbows. He looked down at her. "Tell me," he said. "If I go too far, tell me." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. It was slow, and it was painful. When he entered her, she flinched, a sharp, undeniable bolt of pain and memory. Her whole body tensed, her hands flying up to push him away. "Wait," she gasped. He was gone. Instantly, he pulled back, rolling off her, his face a mask of self-loathing. "I hurt you. I am sorry. God, No," she said, grabbing his arm. She was crying, but she was not afraid. "No, Silas. It was not you. It was them. It was the memory." She sat up, pulling him with her. It has been a long time since anyone—" She didn't know what to say, so she acted. She took his hand, his big, rough hand. She guided it. She put it on her stomach. "Here," she whispered. "Just touch me. Here. Let me get used to you." He did. His hand was warm. He just held her. He didn't move. He just let his warmth sink into her. "And here," she said. She moved his hand to her breast. He was shaking. He was so afraid of hurting her. "It is all right, Silas," she said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. "It is just me. It is just Marla." He looked at her, and the love in his eyes was so profound, so full of anguish and hope, that it took her breath away. He kissed her again, and this time, he was not a rancher. He was not a widower. He was just a man, and she was just a woman. They moved together. It was not perfect. It was halting. He paused. She whispered, "It is all right." She guided his hand. He kissed her. It was real. It was two broken, jagged pieces, finding a way to fit. It was not the smooth, easy joining of whole people. It was something better. It was the hard-fought, desperate, and beautiful creation of something new. After they lay tangled in the quilts, she was pressed against his side, her head on his chest. His arm was heavy and warm around her. "Silas?" she whispered in the dark. It did not hurt, not you." He kissed the top of her head. He couldn't speak. They fell asleep like that. Two souls, finally at anchor, in the one safe harbor they had. A week later, Silas was staring out the window, a cup of coffee in his hand. The last of the snow was gone. Even from the north-facing ridges, the valley was green. "I was going to sell," he said, his voice quiet. Marla stopped stirring the pot of oatmeal. "Sell?" "This place, before winter, before you." He turned to her. "I was done. The ghosts are too loud here. I was going to Oregon. Or somewhere. Just not here." Marla's stomach went cold. "And now?" He looked at her. He looked at the way the morning light caught her hair. He looked at the bed, which was now their bed. "I do not know," he said. "Wait," she said, her voice small. "Just until summer." He walked over to her. He took the spoon from her hand. "I might," he said. "I might stay. For the garden. To see what grows." He was staying for her. He was choosing to stay with the ghosts. Because of her. The bubble of their new, fragile life burst that afternoon. Marla was outside, hanging laundry on the line Silas had strung. She was humming. It was a tune she didn't even know she knew. And she heard it. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. At least 3, maybe 4, coming up the trail from the valley. Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the wet shirt in the mud. "Silas!" she screamed, snatching the laundry off the line, wadding it up in her arms. She ran inside. He was already at the door, his rifle in his hand. "Get in the cellar," he said, his voice flat and cold. The man from the winter was back. But now, Marla, do not argue. Get down, and you stay there. You do not come up, not for anything. You hear me? She nodded, her eyes wide with terror. She scrambled to the trap door in the floor, pulled it open, and slipped down the ladder into the cold, dark root cellar. He slammed the door shut over her head, plunging her into darkness. She heard him drag the heavy bear rug over the door. She sat in the dark, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they could hear it. She smelled the damp earth, the potatoes, the fear. She heard the riders pull up. She heard the jingle of harnesses, the creak of leather. "Silas Greeley!" a voice called out, a rough, loud voice. She heard Silas's boots on the porch, the creak of the door. "What do you want, Sheriff?" Silas's voice was death. Sheriff? Her blood ran colder. The sheriff, the man who had given her the choice. Just passing through, Greeley, checking on the homesteads. Hard winter? It was, Silas said. A pause. "You have not been to town, not in months." "I like it here," Silas said. "Sure," the sheriff said. She heard him spit. "Look, Greeley, we are looking for someone. A woman." Marla put her hand over her mouth to stifle her breath. "A loose woman." Another voice chimed in, a younger, sneering voice. "From Laramie, a harlot, name of Marla. Marla Jennings. You seen anyone like that?" She squeezed her eyes shut. "Please, Silas, please." Silas was silent for a long time. She could picture him on the porch, his rifle held low, his eyes flat and dead. "No," he said. The word was a chip of ice. "I have not seen anyone. Not for 6 months." "You sure?" the sheriff pressed. "She was accused of thievery and indecency. Ran off. Some folk think she came this way." "And some folk," Silas said, his voice dangerously low, "should mind their own goddamn business. I have seen no one. Now, you are on my land. Get off, or you will be trespassing." The sheriff laughed. A short, ugly sound. "All right, Greeley. All right. Keep to your ghosts. But if you do see her, she has a bounty. $10 for her return." "Get," Silas said. She heard the men grumble. She heard them turn their horses. She heard the hoofbeats fade, 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 until they were gone. She waited. It felt like an hour. She heard the heavy scrape of the rug. The trap door was thrown open. Light flooded in. Silas's face was a dark silhouette against the bright square. "They are gone," he said. She scrambled up the ladder. She was shaking so violently she could barely stand. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her. "They know," she whispered, her hands twisting in her dress. $10. They put a bounty on me, like an animal." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, while he sat in the chair by the door. He had not come to bed. He was guarding her. She sat up. "Silas!" He looked over. "I have to go," she said. Her voice was dead. He stood up. "What?" "I have to go," she repeated. Climbing out of the bed, she was shaking. "They will come back. They know. They will hurt you. Because of me. I brought this. I am what they said. I am trouble. I am a plague." "Shut up," he said. "No, I will not. I will not be the fire that burns down your new life. I will not be the thing that kills you, too. I will go. Tonight. I will take Gideon. I will." She was grabbing her clothes, her hands shaking. She was crying, hot, angry, terrified tears. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He did not hit her. He did not yell. He grabbed her wrist. It was not a hard grip. It was not violent. It was just firm. It was an anchor. She stopped. She looked at his hand on her wrist. "Silas," she sobbed. "Please, let me go. Let me save you." He looked down at her. His face was a terrible thing to see. It was the face of a man who had finally decided. "You're not running," he said. His voice was a vow. It was a chain. "You're not running anymore." She stared at him. "But they will kill you." "Let them try," he said. She broke. The terror, the relief, the love. It was too much. She fell against him, burying her face in his chest, her sobs tearing her apart. "I am so afraid," she wept. "I am so afraid. Not for me, for you." He held her. He held her. his arms like steel bands. He held her until she was just trembling. "You're not running," he said again, his voice thick. "This is your home. I am your home." He lifted her. He carried her to the bed. He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a fury that was not for her, but for the world that had hurt her. He kissed her. It was not the awkward, trembling kiss of their first time. It was not the reverent, healing touch of the bath. It was a claim. It was a raw, desperate, and passionate kiss that stole her breath. It was the kiss of a man who had found something, and who would kill to keep it. She kissed him back. She met his passion with her own. She was not a victim. She was not a refugee. She was his, and he was hers. They made love. This time, there was no hesitation. There was no pain. There was no memory of anyone else. There was only them. It was a confirmation. It was a sealing of the vow he had just made. He was claiming her, and she was claiming him. Every touch was a statement. "You are mine. You are not running. You are staying here." She arched against him, taking him, meeting his every move. This was not about healing. This was about life. This was about two people, pushed to the edge, turning and fighting back. They were fighting the sheriff. They were fighting Josiah Wicks. They were fighting the ghosts and the fires and the whips. They were fighting for each other. It was desperate, and it was beautiful. It was a claiming. When he finally collapsed onto her, his breathing harsh in her ear, he was not just comforting her. He was arming her. She held him, her arms locked around his back, her legs tangled with his. "You're not running," he had said. She held him tighter. "No," she whispered into the dark, her voice fierce. "We're not." The air in the cabin the next morning was thin and sharp, like broken glass. The sheriff's visit had shattered the fragile peace they had built, the peace of shared work and quiet healing. Now, the silence was heavy again, but it was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of a trap waiting to spring. Marla was trying to make coffee. Her hands shook, rattling the tin cup against the pot. Silas was not sitting. He was standing by the window, his rifle in his hand. Though he was not cleaning it, he was just holding it, his knuckles white. He was enraged. It was a cold, quiet fury that vibrated in the small room. $10. The words thievery and seduction echoed in his head. Seduction. They had taken her, beaten her, whipped her near to death, and then, with the casual cruelty of a child pulling wings from a fly, they had named her the Predator. They had branded her a harlot, a thief, and put a price on her head. $10, the price of a decent saddle blanket. It was the cheapness of the lie that ate at him. It was the way it spat on her suffering. "I'm riding to town," he said. The words were flat, final. Marla dropped the cup. Coffee splashed across the floor. "No," she whispered, her face pale with terror. "No, Silas, you cannot. It is a trap. They saw you. They know I am here. They want you to come. They will hang you for harboring me." "They put a price on you," he said, his voice a low gravel. He turned from the window, and his eyes were the eyes of the man who had found her in the snow, cold, dead, and dangerous. Like a stray animal, I will not let that stand. "What can you do?" she cried, following him as he moved to the door, shrugging into his thick coat. "You cannot fight the sheriff. You cannot fight the whole town." "I am not going to fight," he said. He was lying. He was not going to fight with guns. He was going to look the devil in the eye. He needed to know what he was truly up against. "I'm going to buy flour." He pulled his hat low. "Lock this door. Bar it. Do not open it. For anyone. Do you hear me? Marla?" She was trembling. "Silas, please. Do you hear me?" She nodded, her lips pressed tight. "There is a rifle by the hearth," he said. "If anyone but me tries to open that door, you use it." He stepped onto the porch. He looked at her. his face grim. He did not kiss her. A kiss was too soft for this moment. He just looked at her, a long, hard look that was its own kind of vow. "I will be back by dark," he said. He left. She slammed the door, dropped the heavy wooden bar, and sank to the floor, her back against the rough logs. The cabin, her refuge, was now her prison. The ride to Laramie was 40 miles of cold fury. Silas kept Gideon at a steady, ground-eating trot. He did not see the landscape. He saw only the smirking face of the sheriff, the sneer in the other man's voice, a loose woman. He had lived apart from the town for 2 years. He had let their whispers about the fire fester. He had believed that if he kept to himself, the world would keep to itself. He had been a fool. The world was a predator, and it always came looking for the weak. It had come for him, and it had come for Marla. Laramie was busy. The spring thaw meant wagons were moving again. The street was a river of mud, rutted and deep. He swung Gideon to the rail in front of the sheriff's office, the word "Justice" painted on the sign, the J half faded. He pushed the door open. The air inside was hot, thick with the smell of stale cigar smoke, unwashed men, and stove oil. Sheriff Brody was there, his feet on the desk, just as Silas had imagined. A young, pimple-faced deputy was asleep in a chair in the corner. Brody's feet hit the floor with a thud. "Greeley! Well, I will be. What brings you out of your hole?" "I was in town," Silas said, his voice flat. He kept his hand away from his pistol, letting his coat hang open. "Thought I would ask about that bounty." Brody's eyes narrowed. He leaned back in his chair, hooking his thumbs in his suspenders. "Legal and proper. Posted by Preacher Wicks himself. That woman, she stole a great many things. The preacher's wife's jewelry, family heirlooms, broke that poor Josiah's heart. A terrible thing. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. It was a well-worn coat." Silas looked at the man, at the badge on his chest, and he saw the rot. It went all the way through. "She was run out of town," Silas said, his voice quiet. "Barefoot, in a blizzard. I heard." "You hear a lot for a man who lives alone," Brody said, his friendly tone gone. "Does not sound like thievery." Silas pushed on, his blood cold. "It sounds like something else." "Bro." Brody stood up. He was a big man, thick in the belly, but he moved with a sudden, surprising speed. He put his hands flat on the desk. "You are getting awful close to interfering in official town business. Silas, that girl is a viper, a seductress. Preacher Wicks said as much. Used unnatural wiles on his boy. You have not seen her, have you?" The question was sharp, a knife point. "Because," Brody continued, leaning forward, "harboring a fugitive is a serious crime. A man could lose his land. A man could hang." There it was, the threat. It was not justice. It was not law. It was a tool. It was corruption. Plain and simple, the town was not run by the law. It was run by the preacher, and the sheriff was his hired gun. Silas met his gaze. The realization washed over him, cold and absolute. There was no justice to be found here. There was no one to appeal to. They were alone. "Just asking," Silas said. He let the silence stretch. "I will need flour and coffee." Brody stared at him, then relaxed, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his face. "Of course. Citizen, general store is right next door." Silas turned, his back to the sheriff. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Every instinct told him the man would shoot him. He walked out. The door closed. The muddy street seemed dirtier, the sunlight weaker. He had looked the devil in the eye, and the devil had warned him off. He bought the flour. He bought the coffee. He did it with slow, deliberate movements. He let them see him. He let them think he was afraid. He rode out of Laramie, his rage gone. In its place was something harder, heavier, and colder. It was the certainty of what must be done. Marla could not stay in the cabin. After 2 hours of staring at the barred door, the silence was screaming at her. The cabin was a box. She was a rabbit in a snare. She had to move. She had to do something. The rifle. Silas had told her to use the rifle. She picked it up. It was heavy, long, and smelled of oil and metal. She had never held a gun before. He had not shown her how. She fumbled with it, checking to see if it was loaded. She could not stay inside. She would go mad. She unbarred the door, her heart hammering. She peeked out. The world was empty. The sun was high. Just the wind in the pines, the rush of the creek. She would check the animals. That was useful. That was a chore. She took the rifle, holding it awkwardly, and ran from the cabin to the barn. She slid the heavy barn door open, slipped inside, and closed it, barring it from within. It was dark, warm, and smelled of hay and animals. Gideon's stall was empty. The 2 cows mooed, low and questioning. "It is all right," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It is just me." She leaned the rifle against the wall, right by the door, where she could grab it. She went to the cows, stroking their necks. Their simple, solid presence calmed her. She would muck the stalls. Work would keep the fear at bay. She grabbed the pitchfork. She forked the soiled hay into the wheelbarrow. She focused on the rhythm. Plunge, lift, turn, drop. Plunge, lift, turn, drop. She did not hear the footsteps. The soft earth and the hay muffled the sound. She did not hear the barn door creak, the bar being lifted from the outside with a piece of wire. She only knew she was not alone when a shadow fell over her. Well, look what we have here. Marla froze. The pitchfork was in her hands, but it was at the wrong angle, heavy with hay. She turned, slowly. It was him, the man from the posse, the one with the sneering voice. Eli, one of Josiah Wicks's friends, one of the men who had... He was standing between her and the door, between her and the rifle. He was smiling, and it was the mean, soft smile of Josiah. "The sheriff is a blind old fool," Eli said, stepping further into the barn. He held a length of rope in his hand. "But I am not. I saw the smoke from the chimney this morning. I told him, I said, that is too much smoke for one man." But he would not listen. "Get out," Marla whispered. Her voice was a dry reed. She raised the pitchfork, but her arms were shaking. "Put that down, harlot." He laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "You are coming back with me. The sheriff said $10. But Josiah said he would pay 20 if you came back, educated." He lunged. He was faster than she was. He was not a grieving rancher. He was a young, cruel buck. He grabbed the pitchfork, wrenched it from her grip with a twist that sent pain shooting up her arm, and threw it across the barn. He grabbed her. His hands were strong. He was laughing. "You like it rough," he hissed, his breath hot and sour. "We all know you do. You begged for it, did not you?" "No!" she screamed, twisting, kicking, fighting. He backhanded her. The blow snapped her head back, stars exploding behind her eyes. The pain was sharp, familiar. It was the same as before. "Silas!" she screamed, a desperate, hopeless sound. "He is not here, bitch!" Eli snarled, the smile gone. "I watched him ride to Laramie. He is talking to the sheriff right now. It is just you and me, and you are going to learn your lesson. For good, this time." He threw her down into the empty stall, into the dirty hay. She landed hard. The wind knocked out of her. He was on her in an instant. He was heavy. He pinned her arms with his knees. She could not breathe. He was fumbling with his belt, his face red with effort and something else. She was going to die, or worse, it was all happening again. No. The thought was not a word. It was a bolt of fire. It was the woman who had laughed in the mud. It was the woman who had kissed Silas. It was the woman who had been saved. No, not again. She screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated. As he fumbled, his weight shifted for just a second. Her right hand, trapped beneath him in the hay, was free. She clawed at the straw, desperate, searching for anything. Her fingers did not find a rock. They did not find a weapon. They found the small, sharp, curved piece of metal Silas used to mend harnesses and cut baling wire. A baling hook. He slapped her again. "Be still," he commanded, his voice thick. You will, take." She brought her hand up. She held the hook like a dagger. She brought it up, hard, with every ounce of strength she had, every bit of fury, every memory of the whips and the sheriff and the cold. She plunged it into his side, just under the ribs. The sound he made was not a scream. It was a wet, surprised gasp. Gah! He froze. He looked down, his face a mask of confusion. You, he tried to say. You stuck me. He slumped sideways, rolling off her. The hook was still in her hand. It was wet and dark. He was on his hands and knees, choking. He looked at his side, at the dark blood pumping out. He looked at her. The cruelty was gone. His eyes were wide with shock and fear. Marla scrambled backward, Crab walking away from him, gulping in air. She hit the wall of the stall. She saw the pitchfork. She lunged for it. She grabbed it. She turned, standing over him. She held the tines pointed at his chest. He was on his back now, gurgling. He tried to get up, but his limbs would not obey. He was drowning in his own blood. She watched him. She, who had flinched when she dropped a pan, she, who had offered her body as payment for food. She stood over her attacker, her knuckles white on the wooden handle, and she watched him die. He tried to speak. A bloody bubble formed on his lips. He shuddered and was still. He was gone. The barn was silent, except for the low, nervous moo of the cows. Marla stared. He was dead. She had killed him. The pitchfork dropped from her hands, clattering on the floorboards. She looked at her hand. It was sticky with his blood, his life. The adrenaline, the rage, it all vanished. A cold, shaking terror took its place, a wave of nausea so strong she buckled. She stumbled out of the barn, into the blinding sunlight. She fell to her knees by the water trough. She did not drink. She just stared. She was a murderer. She began to shake. A low, animal keen started in her throat. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking back and forth. Then the sobs came. They were not tears of grief. They were tears of pure, undiluted horror. She did not know how long she sat there. The sun was moving west. The shadows were growing long. She heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. She looked up. It was Silas. He was riding hard, Gideon covered in foam. He saw her. He was off the horse before it had fully stopped. He ran to her, his face a mask of dread. Marla! My God! Are you... Who did this? He saw the blood on her dress, her hands. He thought she was wounded. She could not speak. She was shaking too hard. She lifted a trembling, bloody finger and pointed at the barn. He, in there, she sobbed. Eli, he came. Silas. Silas's face went from terror to something she had never seen. It was not rage. It was a cold, absolute void. He pulled his rifle from the scabbard on Gideon. He walked to the barn. He did not run. He walked with steady, deliberate steps. He slid the door open and went inside. She heard him. A single, sharp curse. The sound of him kicking something. He was in there for a full minute. It felt like a lifetime. He came out. He was pale, but his face was set, like granite. The coldness was gone, replaced by a terrible, blazing certainty. He left the rifle by the door. He walked to her. He knelt in the mud in front of her. He did not ask what happened. He knew. He saw her split lip, the new bruise forming on her cheek. He saw the dead man in the hay. He just opened his arms. She fell into him, her entire body collapsing. She sobbed into his chest, clutching his coat, her voice muffled. "I killed him. I am a murderer. Oh God, Silas, I killed him." He held her. He wrapped his arms around her so tightly it almost hurt. He pressed his face into her hair. He was shaking, too. "No," he whispered, his voice rough. "No, you are a survivor. You did what you had to do." He pulled her back, holding her face between his rough hands. His eyes were burning. They were full of a terrible, beautiful fire. "He was the last one," he said, his voice a low, hard vow. "Do you hear me, Marla? That was the last man who will ever put his hands on you. I swear it. I swear it on my son's grave. I swear it." She looked at him, her vision blurred by tears. She saw his scar. She saw her own pain. And she saw his promise. He held her. He just held her, rocking her gently as the sun dipped behind the mountains, turning the entire valley the color of blood. Night fell. They did not light the main lamp, just a single lantern. The body was still in the barn. "We have to," Silas said. His voice was dead. Marla nodded. She was numb. He found an old canvas tarp. He went into the barn alone. She heard him struggling. He came out, dragging a heavy, shapeless bundle. He tied it to Gideon's saddle. "Get the shovel," he said, "and the lantern." They walked. He led the horse. She followed, the lantern light bobbing in the darkness. They did not speak. They walked up the ridge, deep into the pines, far from the trail. He found a spot, a small clearing. He untied the bundle. It rolled to the ground with a soft, awful thud. He began to dig. The sound of the shovel was the only noise. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. Marla held the lantern. She watched him work. His back was a wall of muscle. He was not just digging a grave. He was digging them out. The guilt was a physical weight. They were burying a man without a prayer, without a marker. It was a mortal sin. But the fear was stronger. The fear of the rope. The fear of Brody. The fear of Josiah Wicks. The grave was deep. "Help me," Silas said. Together, they rolled the canvas-wrapped body into the hole. It landed. Silas began to shovel the dirt back in. He worked quickly, his breath pluming in the cold night air. When it was full, he stomped the earth flat. He took branches, dead leaves, and pine needles, and he scattered them, erasing the scar. It was done. They walked back to the cabin. The silence was heavier than the body had been. Inside, he barred the door. He looked at her. She was still streaked with dirt and dried blood. He pumped water into the basin. He took a clean rag. "Turn around," he said. She obeyed. He washed her face, her neck, her hands. His touch was gentle, impersonal. He was washing away the evidence. He was washing away the sin. When he was done, he threw the red water out the back door. He sat at the table. He put his head in his hands for a long moment. Then he looked up. His eyes were hollow. "We have to go," he said. She stopped, the clean rag in her hand. "Go?" "They will come looking for him. Not for you. For him, Eli. He has family, friends. They will not let it go. We cannot stay here. Marla." He looked around the cabin, at the life he had lost. and the life he had just found. I meant what I said. Oregon, California, somewhere new. We have to start new. She looked at him. Run. Again. It was the only thing she knew how to do. She had run from Laramie. Now, she had to run from here. She nodded, slowly. I agree. We must go. She walked over to him. She put her hand on his shoulder. He covered it with his own. But, Silas, she said, her voice quiet but clear. The fear was gone, burned out of her. I want you to know I will go with you, but I am not running, not anymore. I am not leaving because I am afraid. He looked up at her. I am leaving, she said, her voice finding a new, hard strength. Because we both deserve to choose our life. And this is not a life. This is a grave. He stood. He faced her. He saw the woman who had survived the snow. He saw the woman who had survived him. And he saw the woman who had just killed a man to protect herself. They could not sleep. The cabin was a tomb. The bed held too many ghosts. He built up the fire and they went outside. They sat on the porch step, wrapped in a single, thick wool blanket. The night was cold, but the sky was clear. The stars were a riot of white, cold light. They sat for a long time, just breathing. The shared act, the shared guilt, the shared grave. It was a new, terrible, and unbreakable bond. Marla reached out from under the blanket. She took his hand. His big, rough hand was cold. She laced her fingers with his. Silas, she whispered to the stars. He grunted, a low sound. I love you. He stiffened. His hand tightened on hers. He did not breathe. He had not heard those words. Not in so long. He did not know how to receive them. I thought, she continued, her voice soft. I thought I loved you because you saved me. From the snow. From them. From dying. She turned her head, looking at his hard profile in the starlight. But that is not it, she said, her voice thick. I love you because you let me save myself. He turned. He looked at her. He saw her. He saw all the pain, all the fear, and all the strength that he had not put there, but that he had uncovered. He saw the woman who had stood over her attacker with a pitchfork. He kissed her. It was not a claim. It was not a question. It was recognition. It was soul deep. It was two people, scarred and broken, seeing each other fully and not looking away. He lifted her. He stood up, the blanket falling away, and carried her inside. He did not carry her to the cot. He carried her to the bed. They made love. It was not the awkward, painful first time. It was not the passionate, claiming act of the night before. It was fierce. It was desperate. It was the act of two people proving to each other, in the dark, that they were still alive. They were reclaiming their bodies. They were reclaiming them from the whips, from the fire, from the violence, from the memory, from the shame. This was not desire. It was a bond. It was a seal. It was a promise, made in the dark, forged in blood and fear. It was forever. They fell asleep, tangled in each other's arms, the fire burning low. They had crossed a line, and they both knew they could never return, but they had crossed it together. The burial of Eli Johnson cast a long, cold shadow over the following days. The act, committed in the dead of night, was a secret that bound them, a shared sin that sealed their fate. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a cage. The land, which had been Silas's anchor, was now just a place to leave. We have to go, Silas said again the next morning, his voice raw. The words were flat, stripped of all emotion save a bone-deep weariness. Marla nodded, her hands wrapped around a cold tin cup. I know. The fragile hope of a new garden, of a shared summer, was gone. It had been replaced by the grim, practical logistics of escape. I will drive the cattle to Cheyenne, Silas said, staring out the window, his back to her. Sell them for whatever I can get. It will not be much, but it will be enough. Cheyenne? She asked, her voice small. Not Laramie. We are never setting foot in Laramie again, he said. The finality in his voice chilled her. It will take 2 days. You will stay here. Bar the door. Keep the rifle close. When I get back, we will take the wagon, the mule, and whatever we can carry. We go west, Idaho, or California. Somewhere they will never find us. His plan was solid, but it terrified her. 2 days, she whispered. Alone. He turned, and his face was a mask of grief and fury. I cannot take you. They are looking for you, but they are not looking for me. Not yet. I can move. I can sell the herd. It is the only way. Marla. He walked to her, putting his hands on her shoulders. I will be back. I swear it. I know, she said, forcing the tremor from her voice. He left before dawn. Marla was alone. She did not sit idle. To sit was to let the fear in. She packed. She moved through the small cabin, touching the few items that made up Silas's life. This was his home. This was where he had brought his wife, Sarah. This was where his son, Thomas, had been born, and he was leaving it all. For her. The weight of his sacrifice settled on her, heavier than the grief. She packed the practical things, a sack of flour, the salt pork, coffee, the bag of beans. She packed the ammunition, the blankets, the heavy skillet. She gathered his spare shirt, the one she had been wearing for weeks. She folded it, pausing to smell the scent of him, wood smoke and clean sweat. She found a small, carved wooden bird on the mantel, its wings worn smooth. Thomas's. She looked at it, her heart aching. She left it. This was a ghost he had to leave behind. She kept the rifle by her side, moving it from the table to the floor as she worked. She kept the door barred. The silence of the valley was immense. Every snap of a twig, every cry of a hawk made her jump. 2 days passed like 2 years. She did not sleep. She sat in Silas's chair, the rifle across her lap, watching the door, watching the shadows grow long and then fade into morning. She heard him before she saw him, the unmistakable steady gait of Gideon. She ran to the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the bar. She threw it open. He was there, slumped in the saddle, his face gray with exhaustion. He slid off the horse, nearly falling. It is done, he said, his voice a rasp. He held up a small leather pouch. It is not much, but it is enough. They would leave in the morning. That night, they did not sleep in the bed. They lay down together on the blankets by the fire, fully dressed, the rifles beside them. They were 2 soldiers, resting before the final retreat. But they had waited too long. Dawn was a thin gray line in the east when Silas, his senses honed by years of solitude, sat up. He did not make a sound. He just listened. Marla, sensing the change in him, was instantly awake. What is it? Dust, he whispered. He was already on his feet, moving to the window. East, on the Laramie Trail. She scrambled to his side. She saw it, a faint, rising plume against the pale sky. It was not a wagon. It was riders. 4 of them. They know, she breathed, the blood draining from her face. Eli. They came for Eli. Go to the cellar, Silas ordered, grabbing his rifle. No. He turned, stunned by the cold, clear word. No, Marla said again. She picked up the second rifle, the one she had killed Eli with. Her hands were steady. I am done hiding in holes. Silas, I am done running. I will stand with you. His eyes met hers. He saw the terror, but beneath it, he saw a hard, bright core of steel he had never seen before. He had not saved a broken bird. He had found a hawk. He gave a single, curt nod. "Stay on the porch, but stay behind me." They did not have to wait long. The riders came fast. They kicked their horses into a gallop as they saw the cabin, fanning out as they approached, their intentions clear. They pulled up, their horses snorting and stamping in the muddy yard. Sheriff Brody was in the lead, his face puffed and red with anger. Beside him, in a dark suit, was Preacher Wicks, his face a mask of cold, righteous fury. With them were two other men. One was the young deputy, Evans, who looked pale and sick. The other was a hard-faced stranger with a gun belt tied low.
"Silas Greeley!"
Brody roared, his hand on his holstered pistol.
"It is over!"
"You are trespassing, Sheriff," Silas said, his voice dangerously calm. He stood on the porch, his rifle held low, pointed at the ground.
"Do not give me that," Brody spat. "We know what you did. We know you have been harboring that harlot, and now we know you are a murderer." "Murderer!" Preacher Wicks shrieked, his voice cracking. "You shed innocent blood. You will hang for this, both of you."
"Eli Johnson's horse was found wandering," Brody said, his voice dropping, taking on the tone of law. "His brother." He nodded at the hard-faced stranger. "Says Eli came here looking for that wanted woman. He never came back. We are here for the girl, Greeley, and we are taking you for the murder of Eli Johnson." "You are not taking anyone," Silas said. He raised the rifle, just an inch, so it was no longer pointed at the ground. "You cannot fight the law," Brody warned, his hand drawing his pistol. The other men did the same, all except the young deputy. "You are not the law," Silas said, his voice cutting. "You are a corrupt bully. Brody, you do the preacher's dirty work. Now get off my land."
"Blasphemer! You will burn!"
Wicks screamed, his face contorted. Silas was about to answer, but a small, clear voice cut through the tension.
"Stop!"
Marla stepped out from behind Silas. She was trembling, but her eyes were dry, and the rifle in her hands was steady. All eyes snapped to her. The hard-faced stranger's eyes narrowed with hate.
"You!"
the stranger snarled, raising his pistol.
"You are the whore who—" "Do not,"
Silas warned, his rifle snapping up to aim at the man's chest. "Do not say another word."
"Marla, get back,"
Silas ordered, not taking his eyes off the men. "No," she said again. "I will speak." She looked at the posse. She looked at Preacher Wicks, at the sheriff. She even looked at the young deputy, Evans, who looked away, ashamed. "You want to know what happened to Eli Johnson?" she asked, her voice shaking but gaining strength.
"Silence, harlot!"
Wicks commanded.
"You have no right to speak."
"I will speak," she said. She took a step forward, onto the top step of the porch. "My name is Marla Jennings. I worked at the laundry in Laramie. I worked hard. I bothered no one." She locked eyes with the preacher. "Your son, Preacher Wicks, Josiah. He cornered me behind the general store. He put his hands on me. He said vile things. I refused him. I slapped his face."
"Lies!"
Wicks roared, his face turning purple.
"Slander! My son is a godly boy."
"He is a monster," Marla said, her voice flat. "That night, he sent his friends to my room. Eli Johnson." She nodded at the stranger. "Was one of them. They dragged me into the street. They beat me. They used a mule strap." The yard was dead silent. Marla turned her back to them. "Silas," she said, her voice clear. "Unbutton my shirt." "Marla," Silas breathed, horrified. "Do it," she commanded. "Let them see the preacher's justice." His hands shaking, Silas unfastened the buttons. He pulled the rough flannel shirt and the chemise beneath it down, exposing her back to the yard. The morning sun was harsh. It lit up the pale, puckered, crisscrossed lines that covered her skin. The scars were old, but they were undeniable. The young deputy, Evans, let out a choked sound. He holstered his pistol, his face ashen. The hard-faced stranger's jaw went slack. Sheriff Brody just stared, his mouth open. "That," Marla said, her voice ringing with a terrible, cold clarity, "is what Josiah Wicks and his friends did. That is the lesson they taught me." She pulled the shirt back up, her hands trembling violently now. She turned to face them. "And then, Sheriff, you came. You did not help me. You did not arrest them. You looked at me, bloody in the dirt, and you called me indecent. You gave me a choice. Leave or hang." Brody had no answer. He just stared. "So I ran," she continued. "I ran until my feet were raw. I ran into the blizzard. I laid down under a tree to die. And this man," she pointed to Silas, "found me. He saved my life. He cleaned these wounds. He fed me. He protected me. And he asked for nothing. He never laid a hand on me in anger or in lust." Her eyes found the hard-faced stranger. "3 days ago, Eli Johnson came here. Silas was gone. He came into that barn. He called me a harlot. He said Josiah would pay him $20 to educate me. He attacked me. He put his hands on me. He tried to finish what they started." She raised the rifle, her voice dropping to a whisper, but it carried in the dead air. "So I killed him. I put a bailing hook in his side. I am the one who killed him. Not Silas, me." She took a deep breath. "I am not a murderer. I am not a harlot. I am just done." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a truth so raw it had stopped the world. The hard-faced stranger looked at the preacher, then at the sheriff, his face a mask of confusion. The deputy, Evans, would not look at anyone. Sheriff Brody was sweating. This was not a $10 bounty anymore. This was something else. It was Preacher Wicks who broke his entire world, his reputation, his righteous authority, his son. It was all collapsing, revealed as a hollow, vicious lie. "Liar!" he shrieked, his face contorted, his eyes rolling. "Whore of Babylon! You will not defile my son. You will not. You will not." He was losing his mind. His hand, shaking, ripped his own pistol from his coat. He was not aiming at Silas. He was not aiming at anyone. He was just aiming at the source of his ruin. He aimed at Marla. It happened in a single, fluid motion. There was no time for a warning, no time for thought. It was the pure, unthinking instinct of a man who had already lost everything once. Silas did not yell. He did not aim his rifle. He moved. He lunged, shoving Marla with all his strength. He pushed her off the porch, sending her tumbling backward into the mud, just as the preacher's gun cracked. The sound was sharp, flat, and final. Silas grunted, a deep, tearing sound. He stumbled back, his rifle clattering to the porch. He grabbed his shoulder, a dark, blossoming stain instantly soaking his shirt. He did not fall. He leaned against the porch post, his face white with shock and pain. Marla screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, absolute rage. She saw the blood. She saw Silas hit, his eyes wide with pain. All for her. The coldness, the clarity, the animal strength from the barn. It surged through her. The preacher was staring, his pistol smoking, his face a mask of insane triumph. He was fumbling, trying to pull the hammer back for another shot. Marla, from her knees in the mud, raised the rifle. She did not aim. She just pointed. She pulled the trigger. The rifle's kick was brutal. It slammed her back, but she held on. The roar of the gun echoed across the valley. Preacher Wicks was thrown backward, as if by an invisible, giant hand. A dark, perfectly round hole appeared in the center of his white shirt. He hit the ground. His hat rolled off. He did not move. The silence that returned was deafening. It was the loudest sound Marla had ever heard. The hard-faced stranger, Eli's brother, stared at the preacher's body. He stared at Marla, who was still on her knees, the rifle smoke curling around her. He dropped his gun. It splashed into the mud. He had come for vengeance. He had found this. The young deputy, Evans, already had his gun holstered. He looked at Brody, his expression sick. Sheriff Brody looked at the dead preacher. He looked at Silas, bleeding on the porch. He looked at Marla, covered in mud, with a murder in her eyes. He looked at the two men beside him, their weapons down. He was a corrupt man, but he was not a fool. He was alone. The justice he represented was a lie, and everyone here knew it. "This," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "is a damn mess." He slowly, deliberately, put his pistol back in its holster. We found no one," he said, his eyes on Silas. "Eli Johnson must have run off. California, maybe." He nodded at the preacher's body. "And Preacher Wicks, he came out here, lost his mind, tripped, his gun went off. A terrible accident." He looked at his men. "That is what happened. Do you understand?" The deputy nodded, his face full of relief. Eli's brother, looking at the scars on Marla's back in his mind, just nodded. "Get off this land, Greeley!" Brody said it was not a threat. It was advice. "It is cursed. Get somewhere else." He turned his horse, his movement stiff. "Mount up. We are leaving." "Sheriff?" the deputy asked, gesturing to the preacher's body. "Leave him," Brody spat. "Let the coyotes have him. It is God's business now." The three men turned their horses. They did not look back. They rode away, slowly at first, and then at a trot, disappearing over the ridge. The dust settled. Silas and Marla were alone. Silas slid down the porch post, slumping to the floor. His arm was useless. "He got me," he breathed, his voice tight with pain. "It hurts." Marla dropped the rifle. She scrambled to her feet, running to him. She fell to her knees, her hands fluttering over the wound. It was high in the shoulder. It was bleeding, a lot, but it was not a killing shot. "You are alive," she sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound. The tears she had not shed in fear, she shed in relief. "You are alive. He did not. I am fine," he gasped. She looked at him, her face streaked with mud and tears, his blood on her hands. He looked at her, his face pale, but his eyes were full of a fierce, terrible pride. They were bloodied, they were shaken, but in the muddy yard, surrounded by the ghosts of their past and the bodies of their enemies, they were, for the first time, truly free. Marla tore his shirt, making a pad. She pressed it hard against the wound. "We have to go," she whispered. "Now." The preacher," Silas said, nodding to the body in the yard. "I will do it," Marla said. He stared at her. You cannot." "I can," she said. He could not dig. His arm was useless. She tended to his wound first, binding it tight, stopping the bleeding. He sat, pale and dizzy, on the porch. She got the shovel. She walked to the grave she had helped him dig for Eli. She began to dig again. Next to it. The work was hard. The ground was cold, but she did not stop. She dug until her hands were raw. She did not ask for his help. She dragged the preacher's body, a dead, heavy weight, to the hole. She rolled it in. She shoveled the dirt back. She did it all under his wide, disbelieving gaze. When it was done, she threw the shovel down. She was covered in sweat and mud. She was magnificent. They did not take the wagon. They would not make it. "We ride," Silas said, getting to his feet, his good hand on the post. "Just ride. We take the horses. We leave the rest." "We will be poor," she said.
"We will be alive," he answered. They packed what they could into 2 saddlebags: ammunition, the pouch of money, a block of salt pork. Silas walked, his steps unsteady, to the 2 small, wooden crosses on the ridge, the graves of Sarah and Thomas. He stood there for a long time, his head bowed. He was saying goodbye. Marla joined him. She stood beside him, not touching him. She let him have his grief. He finally turned. He looked at the cabin, the barn, the land. He looked at the 2 new, unmarked graves. He turned his back on it all. He walked to Gideon, his face set like stone. He pulled himself into the saddle. His teeth gritted against the pain. Marla mounted the pack mule. She looked at the cabin. It had been her prison, her refuge, her home. She looked at the 2 fresh graves. She spat on the dirt. She turned the mule and kicked it, following Silas. He was already moving. His face pointed west, toward a future neither of them could see, but one they would face together. He did not look back. The ride west had been a blur of dust, fear, and pain. Silas's shoulder had festered, and for a week in the high desert, Marla had been sure she would lose him. But he was forged of the same iron as the mountains. He had endured. They had pushed on, past the Snake River, into the land of green. Months later, Wyoming was a scar. It was a memory that still ached when the wind blew from the east, but it was distant. This place, a small valley nestled against the Oregon border, was a balm. It was not high and angry. It was low, lush, and quiet. The hills were covered in grass so deep it waved like a green ocean. Wildflowers, blue and yellow and white, choked the creek beds. The air did not smell of dust. It smelled of damp earth and pine. Their cabin was small, built of rough pine, but it was theirs. They had built it together. Silas, his arm still stiff, had felled the trees. Marla had daubed the chinking. It was solid. It was permanent. Marla found her peace in the dirt. She was on her knees, her hands deep in the rich, dark soil. It was not the thin, rocky ground of Wyoming. This earth was fertile. It smelled of life. She planted beans, squash, potatoes, and corn. She felt a profound, quiet joy as the first green shoots pushed through. She was nurturing. She was not just surviving. She was growing. She would hum, sometimes, a low, tuneless sound she had forgotten she knew. Silas's hands, which she had only known as tools of survival, holding a rifle, gripping reins, digging graves, had become hands of creation. His shoulder had healed into a puckered, angry scar, but his strength had returned. He spent his days with wood. He built them a table, solid and square. He built 2 chairs, sturdy and plain. He was working on a rocking chair, the pine shavings curling at his feet, the scent sharp and clean. He was planing away the rough edges, just as the valley was planing away theirs. They lived quietly, they worked hard, they ate, they slept. The healing was slow. There were still nights when Marla would wake from a dream of Eli Johnson, her hands reaching for a weapon that was not there. There were nights when Silas would stand at the window for an hour, staring at the dark, his mind clearly back at the ashes of his first home. But they were not alone. He would feel her hand on his good arm, a silent question. He would turn and come back to bed. She would feel him sit on the mattress, his weight a solid, reassuring presence in the dark, and her breathing would slow. The fire in the hearth was small, burning low. Outside, a soft rain was falling, a gentle sound on the new roof. They sat at the table he had built, a single candle burning between them. "I missed my time," Marla said, her voice barely a whisper. She was staring at her hands. Silas stopped cleaning his knife. He looked up, his face unreadable in the dim light. "You are sure?" She nodded. 2 weeks, maybe more. Silence. He put the knife down. He reached across the table,
covering her hands with his. His skin was rough, hers was stained with soil. "Are you afraid?" She let out a shaky breath. "I do not know. Silas, what if I am broken? What if the cruelty, what if it poisoned me? My body, it was a thing of shame. How can it create life?" She looked up, her eyes wide. "And the world, it is so hard. What if we cannot protect it?" Silas was quiet for a long time. He looked at the fire. "I lost a son, Thomas, when he died. The father in me. It burned. It turned to ash. I thought I was just a hollow man, a ghost, for 2 years. I was just waiting to die." He turned his gaze back to her. His eyes were full of a raw, tender light. "And then I found you. In the snow. You were almost dead. And bringing you back, it made me come back." He squeezed her hands. "You are not broken, Marla. You are like this valley. You are the strongest living thing I have ever known. You make things grow. Look at your garden. Look at me." His voice grew thick. "If a child comes, it is not from a place of shame. It is from us. It is from this, and we will protect it. Together, I will not fail again." "I am scared," she admitted. "So am I," he breathed. "But I am hopeful." The fear did not vanish, but it made space for hope. Their love deepened. It was no longer the desperate, silent bond of two refugees. It found lightness. One evening, he came in from checking the mule. She was pulling biscuits from the stove, and one had burned black. "That one," he said, pointing. "Looks like Brody's heart." Marla stared at him, then snorted, a small, unladylike laugh. "Then you should eat it. You deserve the victory." He picked it up, juggled the hot biscuit. Victory tastes bitter. He grinned, a real, actual grin. She found herself smiling. It was easy. It was normal. They teased. They laughed. The scars were there, but they were not hidden. One night, she was brushing her hair by the fire. He came up behind her. He put his hands on her shoulders. His thumbs, as they always did, found the raised scars on her back. He no longer touched them with grief or rage. He just held them. They were part of her, like her hair, like her hands. She reached up, her hand covering his. She touched the bullet scar on his shoulder, the one he had taken for her. "Does it still ache?" "Only when the wind blows from the east," he said. "It reminds me of what I almost lost." Their nearest neighbors, the Millers, lived 2 miles down the creek, a young couple, Samuel and Abigail, who were trying to make a go of it. They were friends, a strange, new word. Abigail, barely 20 and blushing, had come to their cabin. "Mr. Greeley, Marla, we are to be wed. Our cabin, it is too small. Would you mind if we did it in your yard? It is so pretty, with the flowers." Marla had looked at Silas. "Host a wedding for people?" "We would be honored," Silas had said, his voice deep. The day was bright and warm. A traveling preacher, a thin, nervous man who looked nothing like Wicks, had come. There were maybe 20 people, the Millers, their families, a few other homesteaders. Marla had made a stew. She had baked bread. She was a hostess. She was terrified. But as Abigail, in a simple blue dress, said her vows to Samuel, Marla felt a warmth spread through her. It was community. After, there was fiddle music. People were laughing, eating. Marla was clearing a plate when Abigail's mother, a kind woman named Beth, touched her arm. "It is a beautiful day," Beth said, smiling. "Your garden is lovely, and you and Mr. Greeley, you make such a fine, solid couple. When were you two married?" The question was innocent. It was kind, and it stopped Marla's heart. She did not know what to say. "We are not. I am a wanted woman. I killed a man. He is a widower." the words all piled up in her throat. Silas stepped in. He had been watching. He came to her side, putting his good arm around her waist. It was a possessive, public gesture. "Not yet," he said, his voice calm and clear. Beth looked confused. "Oh, I just assumed—" "We have been busy," Silas said, "building a life." He looked down at Marla. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "But," he said, and his voice was loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "I think it is time to make it proper." He reached into his pocket. He was not a man for speeches. He was not a man for flourishes. He pulled out a ring. It was not gold. It was not silver. It was dark iron. It was a single, thin band, bent into a perfect circle, the metal filed smooth, but still showing the faint, rough texture of its origin. "I made it," he said, his voice thick. "It was part of Gideon's shoe, the one he wore from Wyoming. It is iron. It is strong. It will not break." Marla stared at the ring. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was not a jewel. It was a promise. It was iron. It was his strength. It was their journey. Tears welled. They were not the tears of fear or grief. They were the hot, heavy tears of joy, of being chosen. "Silas," she breathed. He took her left hand. His calloused, scarred thumb brushed her knuckles. He slipped the iron ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It was real. "Marla," he said, his voice rough, "will you be my wife?" She could not speak. She just nodded, the tears overflowing, streaming down her face. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, yes, Silas, yes." He held her. He held her, surrounded by neighbors. He held her, and he kissed her. It was not the awkward, fumbling kiss of their first time. It was not the desperate, claiming kiss of their fear. It was slow, it was sweet, and it was powerful. It was a promise, sealed in the sunlight, in front of the world. The fiddle music started up again, hesitant, then joyful. That night, the neighbors were gone. The cabin was quiet. The sun had set, and the remains of the stew were on the table. Marla stood by the fire, her left hand outstretched. The dark iron ring was a solid, undeniable circle on her finger. Silas came to her. He stood in front of her. He did not touch her. He just looked at her. He looked at the woman who was his wife. This time, there was no fear. There was no pain. There was no memory of Eli or Josiah. There was only reverence. He slowly, gently, unfastened the buttons of her dress. His hands, which had forged that iron ring, were trembling. He was worshiping. He slipped the dress from her shoulders. He undressed her, slowly. He knelt and removed her shoes. He unbound her hair, letting it fall. She stood before him, naked, in the firelight. He looked at her. He saw her scars. He saw the faint, pale lines on her back. He saw the new, soft curve of her belly. He did not touch her with hunger. He touched her with gratitude. He put his hand on her stomach. "Our future," he whispered. "Now me," she whispered. She undressed him. Her hands were reverent. She unbuttoned his shirt. She pushed it off his shoulders. She saw the bullet wound. She kissed it. She saw the long, pale ridge of the whip mark on his back. She traced it from his shoulder to his hip. She pressed her lips to it. They were two people, their histories written on their skin, and they were not ashamed. He lifted her. He carried her to their bed. It was not lust. It was not passion. It was forever. It was the slow, sweet, and powerful gratitude of two souls who had been forged in fire and had found peace. Later, much later, they lay tangled. The cabin was dark, save for the red glowing embers in the hearth. Outside, the wind began to howl. It was a familiar sound. It was the sound of Wyoming. It was the sound of the wild, untamable world. It was the sound of danger, but it was outside. Marla snuggled closer to him. He pulled the quilt tighter. The wind howled, but their fire kept them warm. They had survived together, and no one will take that from them again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you, so please let us know where you are listening from in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to From Wild West for more stories like this one. And finally, please share your thoughts on Silas and Marla's journey in English. We read every comment. Thank you.